Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast, the podcast where we explore international, national, and local politics in a fine and reasoned way to get to the heart of the matter. I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury. Good evening.
Good evening. And we've got it all this week, haven't we? It was originally meant to be entirely local, but then the National threw us a bone. And then this morning, or overnight, I guess we'd better focus on probably what could end up being the biggest international story of 100 years, but let's hope not.
Yes. So the American and Israeli backed attack on Iran and the death of their supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini.
That's the one. Yeah, no, and obviously has ruled Iran with a rod of iron for 47 years, and I guess we were going to have to now sort of sit and watch. The UK position is we didn't take part, but I guess now, when you look at the response of Iran that appears to be firing off drones in all direction, including, putting citizens at risk in Dubai and British bases, we are now, according to the minister this morning, taking defensive action to protect British citizens. But it looks like this one could be a proper global hoo-ha.
Yeah, it does seem that it seemed a bit odd that what was it Keir Starmer suggested that the Iranian regime should come to the negotiation table and should kind of stop. Well, they were at the negotiation table, and they're being they're being attacked by, let's be honest, vastly superior foes. So it's hard to kind of
Well, it's that interesting.
Land.
Yeah, it's that interesting thing, isn't it? Again with the negotiating table, it's that Iran's been a state backer of terrorism for the last 47 years. I believe there have been 20 terror plots that have been kind of funded by Iran that have been thwarted in the UK. They've funded Hamas and Hezbollah. So I guess it's that piece of the negotiation, I think, was all around their nuclear weapons program. But whether they were coming to negotiate in good faith and give up their global terrorism-y ways is a moot point. But I guess the flip side to that coin is the West has a long and successful history of intervening in the Mideast, facilitating regime change, and everyone doesn't always quite live happily ever after.
No, there isn't really a history of it going really really well. It's just obviously a well, I think the people of Iran deserve to define their own future and to live in freedom and peace, and so does everyone else around them. I'm not sure that kind of bombing people back to the Stone Age is always the best way to achieve that, but at the same time, will whoever replaces the last Ayatollah be worse than
Yeah,
that?
and I guess it depends where the
Is there even a plan?
well, and I guess that again there was an interesting piece. I think it's the son of the ex-Shah of Iran was saying that that there is definitely an option, or there are options to become a kind of a constitutional monarchy or a republic. But I guess the people that have held on to power through oppression and military might over the last 47 years probably aren't going to shrug and go, well, we've had a good run and walk
yeah.
away.
Do you know what? I'll pass the baton. It's your turn,
Yeah,
mate. Yeah, off you
no,
go. That's
we've had a good go, and now's our time. So we will keep everything crossed that things de-escalate pretty quickly, and our hopes are with the people of Iran that in this move that it does lead them to a better, not a worse place.
Indeed, and that's probably about as far as we can go with that one.
I think if we attempt any more insight, it will be like a rhino with an iPad versus a cow with a musket, and neither of those is going to end well.
I'm just not sure which of those I am.
Oh,
Yeah, no, you're quite you're quite right. I'm sure there are other people that can express an opinion on it that actually have something worth listening to and something to say on it. But something a bit considerably closer to home,
but further away.
closer to home but further away.
Well, it's still not close, is it? Are you going? Are
Well,
you
it's closer
going?
than Iran.
Yeah, true. Are we off to Gorton and Denton?
Yes, I mean it's still closer just because it's a bit, just because it's a
Still
northern
quite.
latitude rather than.
Yeah, but the
I mean,
north, what
yes.
was meant to be the super fight of all super fights between Zach Polanski versus Richard Tice versus Andy Burnham, King of the North, turned out not to be that in the end. Um,
Well,
but
no.
only Labour can defeat Reform.
No, is kind of what
Ooh.
the. So just in case you weren't aware, and I don't know where you've been, if you aren't, then yes, the Greens absolutely romped home on Thursday, with Hannah Spencer taking just under 41% of the vote, with Reform in second place, with just under 29% of the vote, and the Labour Party 25% of the vote there. So Conservatives and Lib Dems, I think, both lost their deposit.
They did indeed. Yeah.
So yes, so that interesting though, because the polls were saying that it was essentially there was a percentage point between all three of
Mm.
the Greens, Reform, and Labour, and that's quite clearly not turned out to be the case, has it?
Yeah,
So.
and I think there's a few interesting dynamics to spin this on, Simon,
Mm.
because
Spin
you
away.
can look you can look at it, and for the progressives on the left, I think 66% of the total votes cast were for the Greens um, and the Labour, which is more than they got last time, because obviously that Labour romped home last time. Um, the fascinating thing for me on this is that there is this narrative always that Reform voters, and you see it quite often on political forums, they're the extremes of the Conservative Party. Well, in the last Gorton Denton election, the Conservatives only polled 8%, and they polled, I think, just under 2% this time. So, whilst that 6% might have gone to Reform, the 20 odd percent that Reform got hasn't come from the Conservative right, has it? Because, well, not unless they were all asleep during the last
I mean,
by election.
the trouble with I mean, psephologists will express different views about who voted where, but unless you've actually spoken to people and got specific voting history, you can't really tell whether voter A that previously voted Labour voted Green, or did they just stay at home, and therefore
Mm.
that's why the Labour vote was quite so depressed. There were indications that might have been the case with a lot of the Conservative vote in the general election in 2024, where it wasn't that Labour did so fantastically well. It's that basically, a sizable portion of the Conservative vote stood at home because they were sick of basically being in. Well, whatever. I can't. Again, I'm just falling into the
Yeah,
trap
yeah, yeah,
myself
yeah,
there
yeah.
of trying
Yep.
to kind of suppose from a binary result what the reasons are and what was in people's minds when they put their X in the ballot paper. I know there's been some stuff reported in the media about family voting, so there'll be an investigations into kind of how prevalent that was. But there's some information on was it the International Voting and Democracy Volunteers on their
Democracy
website?
volunteers.
Yeah,
Yep.
their own website actually gives a very good explanation of what it was that they measured and actually how many of them there were. There was only 4 of them observing, and they always observe in pairs, so they were only able to observe 2 locations at once.
Yeah,
And their observations were, I think it was for about 530 voters out of, you know, I can't remember what percentage that is. So stuff to look at there,
definitely.
but doesn't
Yeah,
doesn't look
Green's a
like it
cocker.
could have made the difference of the
No,
the 4,500 majority, though, is it?
no, and I think there's that again, as you say, it's very easy to tell yourself stories, isn't it?
Mm,
You know, you see family voting, and you know there is a narrative that is spun that it's the patriarch forcing all the adults in the house
mm.
to vote in the way that the patriarch would have them vote. You know, none of that. You know, none of us know if that is true, and you know, so I think we have to be careful of that. I guess
Mm.
you know the Greens are delighted, Reform are crestfallen, but there seems to be a message. Well, we never thought we'd win anyway, which I'm not sure is the case. I guess
No.
yeah, the concerning bit for me is, and I know you won't agree because you have a soft spot for the Greens, but from what I saw of their campaign you know, I've described the Greens and Reforms as two cheeks of the same extremist arse for me, and I think that the worry for me is that if politics starts moving further left and further right, and you know we end up in the position that we do in the US, where it's pick your poison, but it's going to be extremist on one side of the political spectrum or the other. I, I'm I find that probably the most uncomfortable part about the whole
Yeah, I think.
election.
Well, I mean, if the whole Brexit debacle didn't teach us anything, it's that extremist, uncompromising positions on either ends, regardless of political spectrum or affiliation, just shouting over everyone else that's quiet and just wants to get on with their lives in the middle is not a way to run a
It's
country.
yeah,
So hopefully not the direction that we were going, but somewhere else, the second by election in 2 years.
well, yes, yeah, we're closer to home, up the road in Southampton in Shirley.
Yes, and they're the Lib Dems. So so there was a by election in was it late
October.
2024 in October, where Satya Kaur basically created a by election because she'd been elected to as the MP for Southampton Test. And then the Lib Dems won it, and unfortunately for them, their their candidate that had won in 2024's by-election has then actually caused another by-election by resigning because they've got a job. That means that's taking them away from Southampton, and far be it from us to say that it might not take you much convincing to be taken far away from Southampton. That's a
Definitely.
that's a level of bias that maybe we won't enter into. But yes, the Lib Dems took that again, but quite a tight race with only
Romped home.
21. Is it romped if there's only a majority of 21 votes? Can you call it
Probably
romped?
not. No, I don't think we can. No, I mean an interesting one for me though, Simon. It's that balance of local politics, isn't it? Local
Mm.
politics, as we know, as we approach nearly our having completed 7 years of this larks. Often it's difficult to read that, isn't it? You know, you'd think that you know the Lib Dems usually do well locally. I think from memory, were Reform in third or second?
Yeah, so the Lib Dems got 27.3% of the vote. Labour got 26.7% of the vote. But Reform got 19% of the vote. So yes, they were in third place
Good
ahead of
showing,
the
but
Greens and the Tories.
yeah,
But it was interesting that considering for quite often UK governing parties get a kicking in by elections. That's not translated into this council by-election. Obviously, the one in Gorton and Denton was a parliamentary by-election, but in this one, actually, the Labour vote, is was quite close to challenging the Lib Dems there, but everyone else off rather distant. So an interesting result compared to the national picture, or indeed
yeah,
what's happening elsewhere.
and one we will digest as we thunder towards May and the election
Mm.
season. And as always, we will be doing our utmost to uphold democracy and ensure that we keep the fires burning. And potentially we'll have another late night live broadcast from the count.
Yes. That's the plan. Unless
Absolutely.
unless something happens. So yes, we'll be broadcasting. That's our intention, is to broadcast live again from the county in Portsmouth. Hopefully, if we can enlist some friends of the pod that are attending the local elections elsewhere around the region, we could set up to kind of get those dialed in. We had some great support from some supporters of the pod last year to keep us up to date on what was going on in Gosport and in Havant. So that was really much appreciated. Well, the other thing that happened, we've kind of talked about Thursday, but back on Tuesday, it was Portsmouth City Council's full budget.
The annual full budget.
Mm-hmm.
This is where, to be fair, the administration and all the officers run around trying to balance the books, and then the opposition parties fire up the leaflet writing machine and ask it to. I wonder whether they use AI now to spit out what would be the most juicy thing to put in their budget amendment to give them leaflet fodder.
Well, I don't think the
Um,
budget amendments were. Well, they certainly don't look like they were AI written, but yes. So there were. I mean, there were amendments from the other three parties. But one of the surprises that took place at the very beginning of the council meeting was the revelation that the remaining two members of the Portsmouth Independents Party, Lee Tyndall and Emily Strudwick, defected to Reform, therefore creating Reform as the official opposition party on Portsmouth City Council with 10 councillors.
the official opposition, and it's one of those things which is, for those who follow local politics, it is both a surprise to no one and a surprise to everyone, in terms of the evolution of Portsmouth independence into Reform. Because we felt it odd that the last two didn't cross the floor, considering that we had observed one of the Portsmouth independents delivering leaflets for Reform. It seemed that there was a closeness between the two camps, which made their separation odd. But I guess the thing that is the flip side to that coin is obviously that the Portsmouth Independents ran very strongly on we are a broad political church. We're about the best candidates for each ward. It's local people doing the best for the people of Portsmouth. How strange that all 9 of their councillors, whilst coming from a broad church, now feel comfortable on the right-hand edge of the political spectrum.
Indeed. Just before we get into kind of a bit more detail, just to remind everybody, please do give us a subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. Give us a like or a comment or a follow. That would be fantastic. If you don't mind, that would be lovely. Let us know what you're thinking of what we're talking about and what's going on in the budget of Portsmouth City Council. Just contribute in that way. Yeah, it was a surprise that it seemed to kind of come out of the blue. I didn't notice any press releases ahead
Nope.
of time. Normally they're quite hot off the social media machine. The Reform team in Portsmouth, but that didn't seem to happen on this occasion. Although the post did kind of go out about halfway through the meeting, we could see the kind of that was going on. I happened to have it on in the background on Tuesday.
And an interesting footnote for another show: you vote for the person, not the party. But I guess if the person crosses the floor, we've seen a lot of floor crossing lately from, close to hand. We've seen Conservatives to Reform, Lib Dems to Reform, Labour to Green. There's been a bit of moving about, and I guess it's that question of, well, if you've elected somebody on a set of values and principles along party lines, should they be able to change the colour of their rosette without going and asking the electorate whether that's okay? One for
Yeah.
another show, perhaps.
Yeah, let us know in your comments if you think that's worth us actually having a show on. So
Budget.
I don't think anybody was surprised that Portsmouth City Council were going to be enacting the maximum total increase, the 4.99%, which is the most they can do without either asking the government for permission to have more or going to the public for a referendum to actually increase it by more. That also includes the 2% increase for social care. And essentially, we've got. Should we listen to the speech from Council Leader Steve Spitt?
Let's
Pitt?
see what. Oh dear God!
Yeah.
You've mangled his name.
Yeah,
So
sorry,
yeah,
Steve.
let's hear what Steve's got to say in terms of prefacing the budget.
Yeah. Okay.
In our centenary as a city, I rise to present the Liberal Democrat administration's budget for 26-27. I'm acutely aware of the circumstances. If, as looks increasingly likely, this Labour government gets its way, only one further time will a leader of Portsmouth City Council present their budget to this council. Members, let the enormity of that sink in. In February next year, the last ever Portsmouth City Council budget will be presented if LGR proceeds. We need to find £1 million per year in savings alongside rises in council tax that the government expect us to impose. Every day, I am reminded of what is at risk. Our libraries, our museums, our community wardens, the maintenance of our parks, our events programme, our greening work, the future ownership of Portsmouth International Port, our port. The frequency of rubbish collections and something that will be hugely important to our residents, the maintenance of our roads. As the clock ticks down on the Colas PFI contract, it was timely that we were recently reminded that our local authority is the only local authority on the south coast of England to receive a green rating for the condition of our roads. It doesn't take an expert to work out that when the PFI ends, with the massive deficit the new council that we will be a part of will inherit from Hampshire County Council and with limited capital resources, our roads will be levelled down to divert funding to those long neglected areas around our city. Portsmouth will inevitably lose out, as a majority of the new council will not be from Portsmouth and will want to see the investment they have long been denied. I use this particular example of the challenges we face because it is clear that those things that Portsmouth has invested in, protected and fought for, are all on the line in a very real sense. Because every day I come across something else that makes me think, will that survive LGR? Our match funding for cultural and creative industries that leveraged nearly £800,000 in inward investment last year. Our business support service, which helps dozens of local Portsmouth businesses to survive and thrive. All of the early intervention work across social services, none of which is statutory, but prevents people, including our most vulnerable young people, from developing more serious problems in their lives. Our concessionary bus fares that go above and beyond the statutory requirement and certainly above that delivered by Hampshire County Council. Our leisure card scheme. These are all choices that we here in Portsmouth have made. And that choice will be gone and we'll be fighting for our share of, yes, a larger cake, but one that will be delivered with a flipping great big slice of it missing. It's a bit like having a house with a mortgage and you sell the house to pay off the mortgage only to end up with another mortgage, but now with no house. Effectively, that's where we are. That's the world that we're living in with the current way this is being dealt with. It is absolute madness. You can only sell these things once. This is selling off valuable assets that councils have held for decades, sometimes centuries, being asked to flog them off to close a one-year budget problem. Complete and utter madness. Sadly, both of our MPs lauded publicly an additional £62.1 million for Portsmouth over the next 3 years, but this is not correct. Around 18 million of that we'd already had in 25-26. So by the time the announcement was made, it wasn't new money, it was previously announced money, we'd already received it. Around 28 million of that is our money, our residents' money, straight out of their pockets, with a 4.99% increase in council tax each year for the next 3 years. Now, when I pushed back at the members of parliament, as did other council leaders around the country about this, they said, oh, but that's the way it's always been calculated. I don't care how it's always been calculated. Pretend you're giving new money to people when it's actually their money is disingenuous at best. We now have sight of the government's send reforms, and they only came out yesterday. I've had to change this bit of the speech, which isn't unusual with this government. You often have to change things at the very last minute. We've got sight of those send reforms, and we're reviewing to see what our view of them is, and see whether the huge cost rises of recent years are to be properly addressed. So returning to the budget that's before us today, when asked to describe it recently, I answered, it's fixing the roof. Well, there is at least a glimmer of light through the clouds before the dark gloom of local government reorganisation depends upon us. And finally, I'd like to bring you back to where I started today, to the risks this city faces as local government reorganisation looms large. A badly thought through pet project of this government that provides not one shred of evidence to show that it will in any way improve the lives of our residents or the services they rely on. And so, Lord Mayor, for the penultimate time, any leader of Portsmouth City Council, I commend the Liberal Democrat administration's budget for 26-27 to members.
Crumbs.
So there was a lot of the conversations were prefaced by some of the national picture with regarding devolution and LGR.
Yep.
And you hear that Steve talked about it there. The previous item on the agenda was an update about devolution, and there was a conversation there taking place where there was a bit of a concern that the government wouldn't accept that the Isle of Wight was going to be suitable as a unitary authority in its own right, even though it's below their
Correct.
minimum size, just because of its geographical isolation. And if that was the case, that essentially one of the other three local or unitary authority areas that are being proposed in the Hampshire and the Solent region would then be forced to include the Isle of Wight, which would throw out even further the kind of concerns and calculations about deficits and about actually responding democratically to effectively to people's differing needs based on where they live.
Yeah, and I think there's a fundamental element to this, isn't there? Which is that if you look at the local council budget, you know, the council budget is basically made up of the statutory things which Steve touched on. These are the things that you have to pay for, you have to do, adult social care, you know, special educational needs provision. These things have to be done. So when you get your cake, those two massive slices come out of your cake before you then look at what you've got left, your discretionary spend. And, you know, this is why I think local government reorganisation causes such I'm going to use the word fear amongst the councillors that kind of, you know, we've often said that, you know, whatever the political persuasion, the vast majority of councillors we speak to want to do the best for their residents in the city of Portsmouth. And if we inherit, you know, if we are shotgun marriage with Gosport, Fareham, Havant, Waterlooville, and possibly even the Isle of Wight, and have to take on a big slice of that budget deficit, you know, or you talk about, you know, they love to say things like, you know, harmonisation of services. Well, you know, I don't think that if Havant and Fareham get their bins collected every 2 weeks, I don't expect the harmonisation's going to be that they get their bins collected every week like we do.
No, and I think that those are some of the concerns that I think Steve was trying to use as examples, is that if there's going to be levelling out, it's not going to be levelling up, it's going to be levelling down to the lowest common denominator, isn't it?
Yeah, and he touches on bus passes, which is my specialist subject. I will appear on Mastermind at
I was
some
going to
point.
say.
Honestly, the difference between Hampshire, Southampton, and Portsmouth, I could bore you senseless with. I
But then that's an
won't.
argument for devolution then, because then those things will hopefully then be coordinated so that they will be consistent across those areas.
Well, and this is the question. We want
Yeah.
consistency. Well, I don't know that you do. If you're a disabled person in Portsmouth and you can use your bus pass any time at the moment, then I'm not sure you want the consistency of Southampton, where it depends on your disability. Some can, some can't, or Hampshire, where you can't before 9:30, because disabled people shouldn't be coming out before 9:30. They should be hidden in the cupboard, which is where all disabled people should be. Brackets, for those who might not know, I am blind myself, so I am being satirical. Close brackets. So if you want consistency, consistency is going to be at the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, and I think that's the concern, and also there's obviously the two different things. Devolution and LGR, both very, very separate
Yep.
separate things, but one kind of begats the other in that kind of respect. But we find out next month, I think, what the government's response is to the. We did a show tail end of
Yep.
last year, where we looked at the suggestions that have been put forward by the different existing council authorities and unitary authorities across the region as to kind of what different shapes that they would want those to take. I think there were four different options. What was interesting and came out of the debate that preceded this, but I haven't clipped it because of time constraints, was that the Isle of Wight didn't actually express a preference itself as to what they wanted to have happen. Which
no, and they wouldn't have
terribly
done.
useful.
Well, and to be honest, I think part of that was the fact that every proposal just said, well, the Isle of Wight's small, it's an island, it's weird, we want no part of it. And the Isle of Wight agreed. So I think, whilst there was, like you say, they any one of the proposals or none of the proposals had the Isle of Wight being anything other than a special case. So I think everyone kind of took that was going to be a given. Because let's be honest, if you're not a special case, if you're an island, I'm not sure
what the other
what you
reasons
have
might
to do.
be.
Yeah, different to be a special case. So back on topic, I guess.
Yes.
So the 4.99, which everybody expected, did we want to have a look and see how whether the opposition parties took a view on that, or
Yes.
did they throw up nearly there, but we'd like something else?
Yes, so I'm gonna take them in order, and just to kind of quickly preface the reform made reform made an amendment to actually recover some of the money from the fund that's set aside recover the money from the fund that's set aside to preempt the fact that the civic offices will need replacing, and that there needs to be investment in that, and use that to fund some services, but also to fund a 1.5 reduction of the 4.99% increase. But I'll let Joe explain it.
Firstly, I would like to welcome Councillor Lee Tyndall and Councillor Emily Strudwick into the Portsmouth Reform Group. You are both exceptional ward councillors and a credit to your residents, and we're delighted to have you on board with us. Thank you also, Lord Mayor, for welcoming me as the Leader of the Opposition. It's just a shame not everyone can offer me the same courtesy. The budget before us today shows a plan to decrease adult social care in Portsmouth by a large sum. The adult social care market is already under huge strain due to workforce shortages, rising wage expectations, increased travel and energy costs, and provider fragility. So to be clear, our group's concern is that this saving depends on market behaviour the council does not control. The Portsmouth Reform Group brings forward a clear resident-focused amendment to the 2026-27 budget. An amendment built on one simple principle: Portsmouth's money should work for Portsmouth's people. At a time when households across our city are under immense financial pressure, even when bills feel heavier and every rise is harder to absorb, we believe the council has a duty to relieve that burden away from any resident we can. The administration proposes a maximum 4.99% council tax rise, generating an extra £4.5 million per year. We believe that this is excessive. Our amendment reduces the council tax increase to 3.49%, in line with inflation, a meaningful difference to thousands of households, while still ensuring the council remains financially stable. We will achieve this by ending the Civic Futures Fund. The fund currently holds 1.821 million, none of which is committed for 2026. Use 1.6 million to reduce the council tax rise to 3.49%, and to invest the remaining £213,000 back into the community. I can assure you we have found cost-effective savings to balance the budget in future years, and it will not affect local residents negatively. As we approach local government reorganisation, we have a responsibility to ensure that every pound spent delivers real value for the people we serve.
An interesting perspective,
Yeah.
because obviously Joe prefaced that with some nervous reservation about the savings to be made in adult social care, which suggests that, you know, there is some anxiety there that those savings might not be achieved. And then in the next breath suggests that you can cut the rise in council tax by 1.5 percentage points, and the 1.8 million you've got set aside for the Civic Office Futures Fund. And 1.8 million is not a lot of money when you start playing with buildings or knocking them about, and you know how old the Civic Centre building is. And the plan is to spend all that. Yeah, I'm not very convinced as you go into local government reorganisation and you journey into the unknown. Emptying the piggy bank of the money you've got set aside doesn't perhaps feel like the right time to do that.
No, and that to be honest is the case that that was the substance of the rebuttals to that suggestion in the debate that subsequently took place. The Reform Amendment also it planned to share £100,000 between 5 community centres and to spend £100,000 over 2 years supporting veterans in the city, which Councillor Standen made the case that about 18% of the residents in the city are either serving members of the armed services, or they are veterans of the armed services, or close family members of someone that is. So I won't make the case for everybody else, because that's essentially what you've said is kind of the point there. And just to kind of highlight that the difference, that 1.5% difference between the reduction that Reform were suggesting in their amendment. If you look at, for example, a Band D property, the council's budget with the 4.99% increase would make that £2,291.71 a year, whereas with the Reform Amendment, that would be £2,264.45.
Yeah, and it's a difficult one, because when you get into those figures, the cost of living crisis, it has not been, suddenly you have to pay an extra £500 for X. What hurts residents is £3 here, £5 there, £2 there, £4 there, and when you add that up over the course of a month, that's what causes your crisis. So. But the savings relatively small, and I guess as with everything, it's risk versus reward. So we've heard what Reform have to say. What did our chums in Labour, who took a little bit of a pointy fingering from Steve in terms of the claims of the Labour MPs? Well, what did Charlotte have to say?
Labour Group Leader Charlotte Gerardo discuss the Labour amendment?
Just last week, we heard the excellent news that inflation has fallen to 3%. The Bank of England said it thinks inflation will continue to ease over the coming months, nearing its 2% target in April. So some analysts think that the drop in inflation rate makes an interest rate cut next month more likely, which is good news for everyone with debts and mortgages. Second, the government funding increase for Portsmouth City Council at 19.9 million for the next 3 years. This is a significant step in the right direction, and it shows commitment to reversing underinvestment and austerity in local government since 2010. The government has provided the first multi-year settlement in over a decade, as well as taking action where the Tories failed, which is delivering on the fair funding review so that every pound of taxpayers' money is directed where it's needed most. Third, there have been other additional funds that the government has provided for Portsmouth. £40 million of Pride in Place funding for Lamport and Paulsgrove to improve those local areas with community-led projects. A new publicly owned defence housing service to renew 783 military homes in Portsmouth. And the expansion of the government's youth guarantee scheme. These are just a few additional things that the government's funded that benefits Portsmouth residents. We are proud to put forward a budget amendment to fund several important initiatives from the city, and a raised zebra crossing on Lawrence Road. Second, continuing on with the issue of road safety, this time in Cosham, Highbury Grove, traffic calming measures, specifically speed cushions and raised tables to reduce speed on Highbury Grove. Third, 5 additional deployable CCTV units for Charles Dickens Ward. Fourth, we're requesting additional funding for the play equipment replacement budget items. So fifth, joint funding between corporate contingency funding and Cosh and Sill to fund improvements and an extension to the Community Kettle Community Centre. And all of our budget amendments are being funded by making reduction to the city centre road budget item. It wouldn't seriously affect the programme of works that need to happen in the first instance, and the rest could be made up in 2027-2028.
Oh,
So
we got it. Yeah. For those new to the podcast, both Simon and I live in the ward of Cosham, and Highbury Grove was mentioned. We got a shout out for traffic calming measures.
Yeah.
And it is purely, I am sure, a coincidence that Councillor Asghar Shah, who is up for re-election on May the 5th in Cosham, 7th, lives in Highbury Grove. So, yeah, no, obviously, it looks like Cosham is a battleground seat for my friends in Labour. And yes, well, wasn't it lovely to hear all those wonderful things that the government is doing for us, Simon? Did it give you a warm feeling inside?
I think each group did their bit to be fair, actually Reform were the only group that didn't spend time either slating the national government or wanting us to praise the national government, depending on obviously whether you are the party that is in national government. So, but it was a theme from the Lib Dem administration, from Labour, and from the Conservative amendment. But yes, essentially, I don't think a handful is probably fair, but a raft of traffic safety measures that are effectively being paid for by offsetting some road expenditure for the city centre into another year. You could be kind of probably really fussy and maybe kind of argue, well, if those things actually really need doing that urgently. I think that's what Councillor Gerarda was saying there. Those aren't the urgent things. Those are the things that were just kind of planned as normal ongoing works for the coming financial year, and therefore essentially moving them out into the next year's expenditure isn't actually going to make that much difference. So essentially, budget neutral. So that was then.
Well, it only leaves what did the Conservatives ask for in there? So there's our friends in Reform have offered us some money back and are keen to empty the piggy bank because for the civil offices. Labour have told us that our friends in government have been oh so kind to us and have got a bit of leaflet fodder in there. Should we have a listen to see what Simon and the Conservatives have to say?
Yes.
Back during the last general election, when Keir Starmer wanted to vote, he said, I quote, "We need to be clear about council tax. Labour would freeze council tax next year and beyond, not a penny more on your council tax, not a penny more than the bill you paid last year. That was 2024 we're talking about. A tax cut for 99% of working people. And yet this year, Lord Mayor, Portsmouth will likely be increasing council tax by 4.99%, as we did in February 2025. The £24 million plug-in power system designed to stop ships burning fuel at Portsmouth International Port may never be used. And the Port Director, Mike Sellers, has been quoted as saying the scheme could be a redundant asset as little as 7 days ago. Was this the right thing to do? Well, absolutely yes. We all voted for it. But if we want to improve air quality in Portsmouth, all the time that electricity prices are 4 times the cost of marine fuel, it risks becoming a white elephant in the port. Well, Lord Mayor, since taking office in 2024, the Labour government, led by Keir Starmer, has had 14 U-turns. By my calculations, that's 1 every 6 weeks. So by his own metrics, his government has lurched beyond serial incompetence in just 19 months. As what would Morgan and Martin do with their time if they couldn't have a pint with your MP photo opportunities? But the vast majority of pubs will still be paying far more in business rates under Labour, and many will sadly be forced to close their doors for good. Road safety should always be welcomed, and it's to that end we're seeking just £6,000 for a feasibility study for a one-way system in Kensington and Chelmsford Roads in Copner. Anchorage Lodge, very popular community centre in Anchorage Park. It's become very tired and it's beginning to fall into disrepair. We're seeking £20,000 to provide refurbishments and to redecorate the centre. Drayton Park Pavilion has become a centre for the park community, and £14,500 has been costed to repair and install security shutters in an attempt. Lord Mayor, this is a much tougher budget than it should have been, all entirely down to the Labour government.
Well, interesting. So I, just again for clarity, I had not listened to those clips before I came in. So my earlier statement about leaflet fodder was speculative, but obviously friend of the pod, Ben Swan, is up for election in Copner. So money there for the lodge in Anchorage Park, and Simon himself is up for a re-election in Drayton. So so a little bit of local bias to that, and it would appear that Simon, Mr. de Boscher there, thinks that the Labour government has been bloody awful.
Well, I mean, to be fair, as the leader of the Conservative group on Portsmouth City Council, I don't think he was naturally predisposed to stand there and say how fantastic they were.
No. I guess we couldn't have expected that, and
no, that would have been unfair.
Yeah. No, it would have been a surprise. So we've got a budget and 3 amendments. I guess the question is, have you got the scores on the doors as to how everybody voted?
I have indeed. Do you want me to? I can go through them. So they were taken in order. So the administration requested that there were individual votes rather than opting to subsume any of those amendments. So the first vote was for the First Amendment, which was the Reform Amendment, and that fell with 9 votes for, 28 against, and 4 abstentions.
And I think there was a bit of party lines there, wasn't there?
Yeah. So essentially, those voting for it were the Reform Councillors, and those voting against it were the Lib Dem administration and the Labour group, and the Conservatives abstained. And I think the Conservatives and the Lord Mayor abstained. I think that was yeah. So next up was the Labour amendment from Charlotte Gerarda. That passed with 26 voting for it. So Labour and the administration essentially, no one voted against it, and there were 15 abstentions. So I think one of the Lib Dems actually voted as an abstention as well. But yeah, I think I'm not too sure. Was it Councillor Oliver? I'm not certain. So I went to the sure, but Simon Bosch's motion. Sorry, chuckling at the rhyme. That also passed with 17 for, no one voting against, and 22 abstentions. So that one passing. So then all in the substantive with the Labour and the Conservative amendments subsumed, but with the Reform amendment rejected. 31 for, 0 against, and 10 abstentions. The abstentions were the Reform group.
9 Reform and the Lord Mayor. So I guess a surprise to no one that 4.99% is kind of, that's locked and loaded now. I think, you know, in terms of our slightly suspect track record on predictions, is one we don't need to worry about, because 4.99 can be nailed every single year until something changes, I guess.
Well, I think the key thing is that the government's expectations are that they've folded that into an understanding that, and this was part of the point that that the leader of the council, Councillor Steve Pitt, was trying to make, is that the government's assumptions are that councils will raise their council tax by 4.99%, by the maximum that they can, without either government approval or without a refund every year. And therefore that's kind of part of the, I think part of the thing that he was quite cross about was the claim that some of, you know, trying to claim some of that money as new money from government, when actually it's the money from the council tax that the council taxpayers in Portsmouth are already paying. So but I mean, I've got a clip of Councillor Pitt's closing speech if you wanted me to play it.
Well, and I think that is the interesting thing, I guess, just if we look at the sort of swirling dynamics of the chamber, you know, is that it feels like there is, I mean, am I reading it wrong, that there's more sort of broad consensus, but it feels like Reform are on the outside?
See, I think, to be honest with you, in most years, except for some times where there seems to be a bit of confusion or an accusation that one opposition group is being favoured by the administration over another, or having closed door kind of conversations with them and the others are kind of excluded. Essentially what happens every year is that all of the groups have a conversation with the administration, and the amendments, or most of them, get subsumed. In order to kind of get the budget passed. In this instance, well, I mean, to be fair, you'll hear what Councillor Pitt says with regarding obviously the newly constituted Reform opposition group. So let's see what.
Let's go run that.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of grown-up conversation in the room today, acknowledging that the position for the city remains uncertain, that we don't know exactly where we're going to end up. I think Councillor Heaney's right. It is possible. We've had a lot of U-turns. We might not see local government reorganisation go ahead, and then where would we have left ourselves? When Reform swept to power in a number of local authorities last year, particularly county councils, it was on a pledge not to put up council tax. And not only are they all putting up council tax, the Reform group in Portsmouth, who haven't yet, thank goodness, run the council, are already pledging to put up council tax, showing just what a load of vacuous nonsense that was that we had to listen to last year. And we've already heard that there's going to be cuts. So, you know, depriving the kids of the facilities they need, cutting early help and intervention for our most vulnerable residents, including young people and the elderly, and yes, veterans, a one-off stunt, a bung to try and convince people that they can trust Reform, a paper-thin ploy to mislead and distract. Serious leadership this is not. So it really is just a very short-term amount of money, and I understand that £2 a month for some families does actually make a difference. Yes, it does. But if you said to those families, do you want £2 a month back for the next year? And then the following year we'll go to the government for exceptional financial support and we'll ask to increase your council tax by more than 4.99% because we can't balance the budget. How do you feel about that? Do you think they're actually going to say yes? Now, with the exception of Councillor Standen, the rest of the Reform group when they were Portsmouth Independent Party, sat here last year and nobody was proposing that we didn't raise council tax by 4.99%. In fact, they voted to raise it by 4.99% every year for the next 3 years, because there was nothing in their amendment about changing that. Suddenly you flick the little sign over the top and, oh no, we've got to do this now because Nige says so.
Oh,
So yes, Councillor Pitt, as ever, not pulling punches.
I'm
And-
so
and
glad
point-
I didn't listen to these. I've hit nails on the heads there. Yeah, it did.
It was quite astounding, actually. Yes, listening to your comments and then thinking, Steve's
Yeah,
just
well,
about
you
to say
need,
that.
you know, again, for those relatively new to the podcast, will know that Simon does all the work, and I just turn up on a Sunday evening and spout. But no, I think there is something that is, and I think this is going to be an interesting dynamic as we head towards May. You know, there is a piece where, you know, it will be interesting to see how the electorate responds to reform.
Yes.
You know, we know that nationally the numbers have been exceptional, the growth has been exponential, and the message has been, you know, the old system does not work. Britain needs reform. And I kind of get that message, and that message has resonated with people, and it's brought people into politics who were disenfranchised. And you know, we've got to give fair respect to George Madgwick. When he first started Portsmouth Independence, he won his election in Paulsgrove by massively increasing turnout by people who felt disenfranchised with the political system. So there is a consistency to that message. I guess the thing that is going to be interesting is whether does Reform still have that freshness of message as they accept the likes of Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick, who are clearly career politicians who are, if we want to use the Titanic analogy, are getting off a sinking ship, or at least getting into a drier cabin. And how will it land with people who raged against? Sorry, who
I'm chuckling
raged.
at your metaphor because that would have meant them getting into a small boat, of course.
Well, exactly that. But how will the people of Portsmouth respond to those now Reform councillors who were elected only a few short years ago on the message that national party politics is broken? That's not what you need locally. What you need is a strong independent voice without the message from head office telling you what to do. I do wonder how that's going to land, and I think the dynamic in the chamber is showing some of that coming to the fore.
I think you're right. I think at the end of the day, let's see what the boss says, and the boss is the Portsmouth public. At the end of the day, they'll be the ones in charge on May the 7th, and we'll see how translatable the PIP vote, which over the last few years has steadily risen. You know, they've risen in a very short amount of time from 1 councillor to 9. How much of
10
that
10 now.
support will translate over to reform? So they're not immune to the disquiet or dissatisfaction of some of their voter bases that, for example, certainly the Labour group, the Labour Party are experiencing as voters express their dissatisfaction with how the national government are doing. Obviously, the Lib Dems might be facing a similar thing if people are deeply dissatisfied with how the administration is running the city, because they've been running the city since 2018 with in no overall control. And the Conservatives are still very, very heavily bruised and depleted after obviously their long stint in government and voters' dissatisfaction with them. It's almost like a perfect storm for an quote unquote outside party to ride in with the case of, well, we're not like all of this. So almost like you say, like Pip have previously been saying themselves, we're not like them. So how much of a showing will voters give to Reform? How much of a showing will voters give indeed to the Greens, who we've seen, looking at the by-election results, are doing very, very well? It's all to play for.
It is all to play for as we thunder towards May, and we will start to discuss hustings and all of those things. But for now, you've been listening to the Pompey Politics podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sansbury. Please join us. So next Sunday, 6:27, we'll be hearing from the Cabinet Lead for Housing and Preventing Homelessness, which is Darren Sanders. We'll be coming onto the show to answer some of the questions. So if you've got questions, do send them to us at studio@pppodcast.uk, or look at our website for our contact details, or leave us a voicemail. And in the week, you can catch us on Wednesday. We'll be casting our eye over PMQs in our little mini episode of PPP PMQs. See you next time. Don't forget to sign up for the newsletter, or go to the website if you want the links to give us your views on who you think will win in each of the 14 wards in Portsmouth in May. So we'll see you then. Thanks. Don't forget to like, follow and comment on Facebook, or comment and subscribe on YouTube. Find us on all the social media platforms: Facebook, X, YouTube, Threads, LinkedIn.